This is MacVoices TV. Welcome to MacNotables on MacVoices TV. This is the talk of the Mac community, and MacNotables is the home of the Mac experts you want to hear from. I'm Chuck Joyner, and I'm happy to welcome Tonya Engst of TidBITS and Take Control, the boss of TidBITS and Take Control, but we won't tell Adam, Tonya.
Hi.
It's great to have you. And Tanya's laughing because we've had a few technical problems getting this up and running, but now everything is running perfectly smoothly, right, Tonya?
It's going to be very smooth.
It's going to be very smooth.
Very
smooth. Tonya, I've been anxious to talk to you, especially you, since the WWDC keynote announcements, since you are very much in the publishing area in several different ways. There were a couple things that were announced that I wanted to get your take on, specifically NewsStand and also the reader aspect of Safari. So how about if we start with NewsStand? Do you think this is going to be what finally moves magazines onto the iPad in an acceptable way and maybe leaves paper in the past?
Well, interesting that you should ask, because we've been talking about that somewhat around the lunch table and the dinner table recently between Adam, my co-conspirator in all things TidBITS, and myself. And the question that has emerged for us now that we're a little bit out of the Steve Jobs reality distortion field is who exactly or what publications exactly will appear in this new NewsStand app that we'll be seeing with iOS 5. So it seemed like there were kind of two possibilities. One would be that News Center is going to bring together all of the different apps that already exist that allow you to do in-app subscriptions. And those would be publishers who have more money to bring to bear to the problem so that they can get a professionally designed app developed and maintained. And so that the NewsStand app would become a place where consumers could go to kind of collect together all those different publications in one place. And at that point, the people doing the publishing will be sending their issues or their editions into the app, if you will, using the formatting that it needs so it looks good in the app. And again, that's going to be resource intensive for a company to do. On the other hand, they probably almost certainly get a lot of control over the look and feel of it. So that's kind of one way that Apple could do it. It sets a pretty high bar. Someone who is, publishing their middle school's newspaper or something probably isn't gonna do that. That's too expensive, takes too many resources. So the other way that Apple might do it is to have more of an iBookstore model where you would be giving them a PDF or an EPUB of your publication. And that is considerably lower cost, lower effort, less resources model where you could bring in a much larger group of publishers. And the reason why this would be, sort of especially interesting around, my lunch table or dinner table is because TidBITS, which is a publication that covers the Macintosh and the tech industry. When we started TidBITS way back when we started it way back when it was a HyperCard stack, but shortly thereafter, it became a weekly newsletter that we sent out in email. And in fact, although you can get it lots of different ways now, it is still very much, for some people, a weekly newsletter that goes out in email. So it would be well within our resource capabilities and interest to make this thing into a weekly edition that people could access right in the NewsStand app. So we're going to be waiting with interest to learn more details from Apple about what they have in mind for this, as I think would a lot of publishers, because nobody can possibly decide if they're going to do it until they know technically what's going to be required. And of course, we'll also want to know financially what kind of a cut Apple's going to be willing to take. So that's kind of one way that Apple might do it. The other way that Apple might do it is to have more of an iBookstore model where you could bring in a much larger group of publications. And again, that's going to be resource intensive for a company to do. On the other hand, they probably going to get. So that's kind of the publisher take on it. But I think for end users, it's pretty clear that consuming media right now is a fairly challenging proposition if your organization is not super excellent, because this magazine you read on paper just the way you always have, and this other magazine you still read it on paper, but it's got this great website that you go to some of the time, and this other magazine is actually a blog, and this stuff you read in your RSS feed, and that stuff you just read when you read Facebook, and this thing is an app and that thing isn't, and it's really kind of out of hand from the standpoint of the end user keeping track of it all. And I think that's what Apple's trying to do, is to bring it together. So we'll get more details soon, I hope.
Tonya, something I didn't know about TidBITS until you and I talked pre-interview is that you publish a Kindle version.
That's right.
And which really surprised me, and simply because Amazon requires a publisher to charge for it. And TidBITS has always been free for the asking or for the subscribing in your online version. And I'm really curious to see how you feel about the pricing that you're required to do at Amazon to get it distributed that way, and how your readers have reacted to that, because it seems kind of strange. On my Mac, I can get TidBITS for free. On my Kindle, I have to pay for it.
Well, first of all, if you want to play and be in the Amazon Kindle store, at least last time I reviewed the contract that you would go into with them as a publisher, you do have to charge 99 cents a month for your publication. That's the lowest amount. You can charge more, but that's how it is. And some people really love their Kindles, and for them, it's absolutely, completely worth 99 cents a month to read TidBITS on their Kindle. And we have always very much tried to distribute TidBITS in any medium or online venue where we reasonably could. And, in the old days, that meant, Genie and Delphi and America Online and CompuServe and, Bix and just all kinds of things, and that's all gone away, but we still try to maintain lots of different ways that people can access TidBITS. And so from our point of view, the Kindle is just another way to do it. And on the one hand, it does cost 99 cents a month, but on the other hand, we do have to do just a little bit more work to make it available. And if someone is creative and kind of technically equipped, there's plenty of ways that you could get TidBITS onto your Kindle at no charge. You would just have to do a little more work to get it there. And it's not a huge revenue source for us by any means. We don't actually publicize it particularly strongly or broadly. It's not something, if you came to our website, where you would immediately realize that you could get it on the Kindle. But yeah, it's there, and honestly, being a publisher online, when we started, well, as I said before, when we started, we were a HyperCard stack, so that's a little funny. But for many years, we were just an email newsletter. We were just text with some asterisks and stuff for formatting. It was very simple. And even our website for a long time into the mid 90s was very very typical of its era, but it was not fancy. And the bar that you have to get over to have kind of an acceptable media site these days, it keeps getting higher. And we don't make our web pages by hand anymore. We have designed a custom backend database, a content management system that runs all this stuff, and the pages that you visit are dynamically generated. And we've worked in a commenting system, and we've had to actually have a line. We've had to make a budget for beginners, but we've had to make a line in the budget for development, and it's actually a very significant cost for us. And so I couldn't really feel too badly about finding new revenue sources for TidBITS. So if we do have to charge some money for people to access it in the NewsStand, so long as, they're aware that they could get it in other venues if they wanted to, if that's appealing to them, I think that's okay. We all have to eat here, and we all have to keep buying iPads and Kindles and all this stuff constantly, and it does take real resources.
You mean Adam's not out hunting down dinner right now?
Out hunting down dinner, did you say?
Yeah. I mean, if you have to eat, he should be out there in the woods, tracking something. But.
That's right. We actually use our iPhones. We have special apps on them. We take them out in the woods, and the iPhone starts to beep when we get close to a squirrel.
Sorry, I brought it up.
Sorry.
Well, one thing we should say, though, too, the cost of TidBITS on the Kindle is nominal. I believe, am I correct in saying that you charge the bare minimum that Amazon requires you to do?
As I haven't actually reviewed their requirements for publishers in a few years, so it's possible some things change, but at the time it was the lowest amount, which is 99 cents a month, which is really not a huge amount of money.
No, I mean $12 a year, and really what you're doing is you're paying for the convenience. If you want TidBITS for free, you can get it for free. If you want it on your Kindle conveniently, like you said, the more techie people can get it there.
Oh yeah.
But that way it's delivered over their WhisperNet, and it's just there whenever it's available.
Yeah, so if you take your Kindle, on the train every morning, and Tuesday mornings you like to read TidBITS, poof, it'll be there, because TidBITS is always distributed on Monday nights. So it seems to me, that's okay.
Yeah, I agree. But your comments about how you would deliver it, whether it's an EPUB format or a PDF or whatever, again, you think like a publisher. I hadn't thought about the logistics of it. I just sort of assumed that Apple would be in the distribution business, providing, well, forgive me, but I'll go with the metaphor, the newsstand, and then the publisher is delivering on the newsstand whatever it is they want to deliver. The idea that Apple would have some significant requirements there never even occurred to me, and I can see how that would confuse things.
I can tell you that for the iBook store, for instance, will only take books in the EPUB format. But there's nothing really crazy about that. For instance, for a long time, Amazon wants books in a special form of the Mobi Pocket format. Most ebook distributors want only, a few formats. So there's nothing unexpected about that, but it can be inconvenient from the publisher's standpoint if, this reseller wants a PDF and this one wants an EPUB and this one wants a Mobi Pocket, and there really isn't an effective way to convert between this and this and this if you want good formatting. It's a very rapidly changing environment right now. And then, of course, for the end user, what they need to be aware of with all this stuff is EPUB is a format where behind the scenes the publisher isn't really saying exactly what the layout should be like. The publisher is more kind of saying, this is a heading, and this is a really big important heading, and this is a screenshot, and the publisher can provide some thoughts about how that stuff should be formatted, but ultimately it's partly up to the program that you're using to read the book as to how it's going to end up formatted. And also, because you, as the end user with an EPUB like in iBooks, you get to say what font you want to read this stuff in. So that's great, except as a publisher, I can't give you good page breaks if I don't know what font you're going to be using, because I don't know where your page is going to break. So it's trade-off, definitely. And I know certainly people who have this or that eye problem, they love being able to set their own font. And of course, that makes perfect sense. But on the other hand, the PDF, the publisher says, here is this beautiful layout that I'm doing, or here is this particular layout. And that you can see, your book or your magazine page looks exactly the way the publisher intended it, which can be really excellent, or, if you really terrible if you don't like the way the publisher lays it out. But it's definitely a completely different philosophy. And the Mobi format, which is which is essentially, not specifically, but essentially what Amazon is using, is more on the EPUB, is indeed on the EPUB side of things. And that's partly why a lot of the books that are coming down right now, the formatting is not sensational. And that's partly because publishers don't have the tools yet.
Folks, if this sounds a little bit like inside baseball, it is. But I think it's important that you understand what's going on out there. And I feel like I also have walked this path just a little bit in delivering audio programs and video programs, because I have to think about, for example, if I send out an audio program, do I send it out as an AAC file, which is Apple's format, which will let you play obviously on your Mac and on your iDevices, but then it leaves me off of any other portable device formats and makes it more difficult for Windows users. MP3 has been sort of the default ground, but that also means that I can't take advantage of some of the formats that AAC takes advantage of, or offers, excuse me. So I feel like I feel Tonya's pain in some of this. Same thing with video and some of the debates we're having right now over Flash versus HTML5. If you are dependent upon a Flash delivery system, guess what? On your iDevices, you're kind of out of luck.
Yep.
So, yeah, Tonya, some of us have been there before, and I want the listeners to understand it definitely puts Apple in the driver's seat to try to standardize things. But Tonya, it feels like the burden is shifting back to the publishers. Up till now, if you delivered a document to me in whatever format, I had to go and find the reader or hope that Safari or Firefox or whatever will support it, or my email program will support it. Now it sounds like the onus is going to be on the publisher to come through a particular doorway, deliver things through that doorway in a format that doorway will accept. It'll make it easier for the user, but the publisher is going to have a big challenge facing them.
We're seeing an absolutely phenomenal change. It started when the iPad shipped, last year, and it's just amazing the change in expectations and tone from customers who buy the Take Control ebooks. It used to be, would you be so kind as to tell me if there's some funky, geeky, special way that I could please get your ebook on my unusual ebook reader or my iPhone or whatever it was. And the assumption now is basically sort of more like, what is your problem that your book doesn't immediately work on my ebook reader? Customers completely expect a polished solution that works really well for them, and we're just scrambling to be able to deliver that for them. And I'm sure all publishers are. The landscape is just changing very rapidly, but it's an absolutely phenomenal, amazing change in the expectations of just everyday people. Someone who just got their first Kindle, their first Nook, whatever it is, they're dipping their toe in and trying ebooks, and they don't want it to be geeky or require them to know about file formats or any of that. They just want it to work, and that's completely reasonable on their part. But boy, is it a change.
And Amazon has done a great job with the Kindle, making that experience happen. Apple has done a great job making it happen with iBooks. The trouble is they're two different formats. So, once again, we're still fighting a format war of one kind or another. And we've had a couple discussions on some of my shows about, do you choose the Kindle format, use the Kindle app on your iPad, and that way, theoretically, the door stays open for you. I don't know. It's a tough discussion to have right now. I'd like to think, though, that there's got to be a developer or two out there somewhere that are working on some nice conversion utilities, so that if I get a book in EPUB that I can convert it over to Mobi, there might be a few compromises, but at least it won't be sitting there and be completely useless to me if I want to change readers. Yeah,
there are converters that as an end user you can use, especially if you just want to read the text, but it's difficult to find something that's really a good solution for a professional kind of a thing where you would be proud of the look of your converted text. That's the challenge. And with the iBook store, Apple just yesterday or the day before with iTunes 10.3, you can now you can now go into the iTunes store, and they have an iBook store section of it that you can access right on your Mac or your Windows computer. You don't have to be on an iOS device anymore, and you can shop right from your computer. You can't actually read the book you've purchased from the iBook store in iTunes on your computer yet, but you can do the whole shopping experience on your big computer screen and then sync the book over to your iOS device. So that's a small change from Apple. Hopefully soon you'll actually be able to read the book on the computer too. So we'll see. We'll get there.
Yeah, that's another interesting choice that they've made is they keep telling us nobody wants to read the books on their computer. Well, yeah, maybe that's not the best reading experience, but if it's a reference book or something like a take control book, I very well may want to open it on my screen.
I think readers, customers, people who read books, they're going to want to pick where they want to read it. And there's going to be a perfectly reasonable use case for pretty much any possible device. I mean, this is like an old story, but I remember just being shocked. My sister-in-law loved to read ebooks on her iPhone back when not very many people did that. A few years ago, I was like, why? It's such a tiny screen. But she was getting up in the middle of the night with her infant and breastfeeding, and she would read because it was backlit, and it was like the one way she could sort of pass the time, and it was fabulous for her. And her kids are older now, and that's still most of her reading is on the iPhone. That's just the habit that she developed. So, there's use case for pretty much any scenario.
Yeah. Well, Tonya, up to now we've talked about the kind of things that you produce through one channel. I guess all the production values that go into putting together a formatted book. And also, TidBITS through a different delivery system. How about Reader in Safari, though? This is going to be another one of those changes. It looks suspiciously like Instapaper, Marco Arment's utility, which I dearly love. I do know that Marco has enhanced his, along the way, so the features, at least we saw in the demo, don't match Instapaper, but still, it's the same thing. But the interesting thing there is it strips out, I won't say it reformats, but it strips out the advertising. It presents it to the end user in a very appealing, desirable format.
Right.
But it takes out the advertising, and that takes money out, at least in theory, out of your pocket and my pocket if I'm authoring these things. Good, bad, new challenges, I have to find new ways to monetize. What does this do to you?
Well, first of all, Safari 5, even now in Snow Leopard, has sort of a reader option. You click a little buttony thing over on the right-hand side of the URL field. Sometimes you have to click the RSS feed button, and then it turns into a reader button. And that does the second thing that you were describing. It takes the main article on the web page. It has to make a good guess, but it makes a good guess usually. And it just gets rid of all the ephemeral clutter, navigation bars, a lot of advertising, and lets the person doing the reading just have a nicely formatted, kind of easy to read article. And this is a nice feature for people who just want to read stuff without a lot of advertising and other clutter. But as you were saying, for a publisher, this has some issues because they're not looking at the advertising, and we rely on the income earned from the advertising so that we can provide them with the article to read. So it's not so good. And then the other feature that we're looking forward to in the version of Safari that will come with Lion is this sort of read later feature, which is like Instapaper, where you sort of indicate to Safari, hey, I want to read this thing later. And we were talking about this before the show, and where it seemed like I'm a little unclear on if when you say that you want to read it later, if you're just retaining the URL or if you are actually downloading the stuff to your computer so that you can read it later even if you're offline. And just like Instapaper, it also puts the URL, and or the downloaded content, we're not sure, onto all your other devices that are linked up under the same Apple ID. So if you are using the web on your Macintosh computer and you put a bunch of stuff to read later, you could then in bed at night, if you're reading in bed before going to sleep, you could then read those articles on your iPad, for example. So it's a little, it wasn't quite clear about if you're just moving the URLs around or if you're downloading, but be that as it may, that's also kind of a neat feature that could be not so good for the Instapaper people, except that it only works in Safari. So people who are using the Google Chrome browser or Firefox or whatever they are would still need to use a third-party solution, and there's a lot of those people. Publishers of web pages have a very unique and growing challenge to, on the one hand, be able to stay in business and buy all the gear and make all the databases and put all the great hooks into their websites that are expected. We were talking about that earlier, and I was saying, for instance, that TidBITS actually has to budget for development now. And one of the examples is we don't just publish articles, we want to let people comment on them. And we don't just want a whole lot of crazy comments, we want people to log in so that we can kind of moderate out or filter out people who are just going to swear at us in the comments or who are going to spam us in the comments. So it's a significant effort for publishers who are publishing on the web to put out decent content on a decent website and kind of keep it modernized. And that does take a significant stream of income, and advertising is a very important source of income for a lot of websites, including TidBITS, but I mean, we're one of many. So yeah, I mean, we're not thrilled if people read our content without looking at the ads, because that's not good for advertisers. And I think it's kind of one of those chicken and egg things where if most websites just had one or two ads that were not too in your face, then most readers wouldn't object to it very much, and they wouldn't try to find ways to not look at the ads because the ads wouldn't be a big deal. So customers not really the right word, reader is a better word, but I don't want to confuse people with the reader feature in Safari and with people who are reading the web page. But the people who are reading the web page, of course, they don't want a lot of ads that pop up out at them and cause a distracting environment. So of course they're going to install software or do whatever they can to get rid of those ads. But the more people that do that, the more the publishers feel compelled to put more attention-grabbing ads on the page. So you can see where we're going with this. We're going nowhere good. But I think most publishers are just looking for different ways to make revenue. And you've seen lots of that in the last 3 or 4 years with publishers selling apps on the iPad, for instance, with in-app subscriptions, websites that are gated, where you do have to pay money and subscribe in some way to access their kind of premium content. Certainly the New York Times is a very high-profile example of that right now. So I think that Apple's reader feature in Safari is kind of a small piece of the story of kind of the ever-escalating need for publishers to find a way to make money. And if advertising isn't going to be working as well, then publishers are going to turn to other models. And that is clearly happening.
There's so many things here. Advertising is, the expectations, I think, of advertisers are going to have to change. I don't believe that advertisers, I think that they believe that when the web model started, that if you put an ad up on your website, people are going to click through and buy right then. And, boy, this is going to be a great thing. And it's just not the way the consumer works. It's not the way I work. And as much as I don't like to look back at old media and take too many lessons from them, just because somebody ran an ad in Business Week or Fast Company or whatever you happen to read, doesn't mean that you went and bought the product based on that ad. It meant that you were introduced to the idea, you started to think about, if they did a good job, they entertained you, they caught your eye, hopefully informed you about what their product would do. it may have taken 4 or 5, 6 exposures to that ad to close the sale if you were a candidate in the first place. Now, I think the advantage is that if they place something on the TidBITS website or the MacVoices website, they know that they are reaching a very distinct, specific target audience. But that still is not going to translate into instant sale. And I think that's one of the problems that we've had with the advertising model. And now I think they're going to have to go back to that, because the one good thing about this deal is that Apple is not giving you a way to really to subscribe exactly. That's still the purview of RSS. You're still going to have to go to the TidBITS website, see the article, say, hey, I'd like to read that, and click on it to save it to read it later. So it doesn't cut you and me as web publishers out completely, but it does raise some interesting issues and change some expectations.
That's right. And I mean, getting into what you were saying a little bit more, and we were talking about this previously also, I think that the whole business of putting advertising on the web has allowed people to try to quantify the value of, advertising in a way that really wasn't possible with the print medium before. And I think it's been disappointing to people in the PR industry and the marketing industry to learn just how low the actual click-through numbers usually are in terms of how many people actually click on the ad to go see, the content on the other side of it. And of those people, how many people actually, buy something or sign up for something right away. It's distressingly low. And I don't mean just for TidBITS. TidBITS is completely normal. It's just sort of across the board. I think especially people who sell advertising or who are in publishing would always like to hope that the advertising is really effective. And it just turns out, time and time again, all different kinds of websites, all different kinds of content, it's just often not the case. So that's just something everyone's been dealing with since the internet became a dominant medium for advertising, and we're all trying to figure out what to do about it. And on the other end, the great thing about the internet is you have so many niche publications who can really reach and target a particular audience, and then when you can match them up with an advertiser who is interested in reaching that audience, and if the audience is interested in the advertiser's products, then you have a very tight match, and it can work very well for everyone. So it's just a lot to pay attention to. A lot of new stuff happening, as is the way it is.
But your comment about disappointingly low, I challenge that a little bit. Not challenge you, but I challenge it because it's the expectations that have been sold to people advertising on the internet. I wish we had Dave Hamilton here from Backbeat Media, because he could probably set us straight and tell us both why we're wrong. But I think that's a problem. I think that those expectations, somebody finally said, hey, we can tell you exactly how many widgets you sell as a result of this ad. And it was disappointing because they all thought it was a lot more. On the other hand, it's a lot more quantifiable than placing an ad in a print publication where you have no chance of having any idea how many widgets you're going to sell. So it's an interesting thing. And then to have Apple step in and, at least for one way of viewing that content, strip it out, it just makes it all the more confusing. And I really think what we all need to do is reset some of those expectations. And I'm talking about us not as producers, but as consumers.
Oh, yeah.
Go and buy something.
Across the board.
Tell somebody, why. Yeah, tell somebody you saw it 3 or 4 or 5 places. And, if there was a deal closer, great. But let them know that the advertising is working through websites that you want to support. I think it's a really important thing moving forward. To become active in the community and active in the industry as a consumer.
Right,
and that's the only way you're...
And also to keep in mind what you were saying earlier, just because you can't just because you can't quantify an ad success, it doesn't mean that people didn't see the ad and be reminded of the product, and maybe a year later they'll be like, oh yeah, what was that, whatever that hard drive I read about, or what was that keyboard? And so you may be picking up sales by keeping your brand and your product in people's awareness. It's just not trackable.
Yeah. Tonya, we've been at this for a little while, kind of beating on two specific announcements of the keynote. I want to give you a chance to let us know what you think, a couple of the things that you were most excited about or you felt most applied to you, maybe not necessarily as a publisher, but just as an end user. What got you excited?
All right. Well, personally, beyond just the fact that I'm excited that Apple is just, they're not being complacent. They're not saying, we have great products, we're just going to kind of sit back for a year or two. They just keep pushing the envelope. And it feels like, they said, okay, what are the 10 things people don't like the most about their iPads and iPhones and iPod touches, and what are we going to do about it? So for me personally, a really small touch is that the camera app got the ability to become available to you. This is the iPhone version. If you double press the home button, that used to be an option. And it went away, with iOS 4, one of the recent versions. And I just really like that, because when I want to take a picture, I want to take it right away. So they've worked quick access to the camera right into the home screen. So if you want to use the camera without unlocking your iPhone and typing in your passcode and all that, you can. And they also have worked it so you'll be able to take a picture by pressing, I think it's the volume button on the side of the iPhone. So you won't have to use a button just, on the screen of the camera. So for just real quick use, I think it's going to make it natural and more fun. And so for me personally, I think I'll be using that a lot. And people were sad, people who had figured out in the older versions of the operating system that you could go into settings and customize it. So a double press of the home button brought up the camera. I mean, we were bummed out, and it wasn't just me, because other people were commenting here and there in the blogosphere, hey, I liked this feature. But so it's nice to see quick access to the photo app come back. And of course, another camera-related feature, which is going to be awesome, comes with the new iCloud service that Apple announced, which will, I think, basically, mostly, kind of roll out with iOS 5. And that's going to make it so when you add a photo to your Apple ecosystem, maybe by taking a picture with the iPhone, or maybe by adding a picture into your iPhoto library, that picture is according to Apple, that picture is going to sort of auto-magically just appear on all your other Apple devices that are using your same Apple ID. So you can take pictures with your iPhone and look at them on your iPad, or look at them on your computer, or look at them on your Apple TV. I think that's just second-gen Apple TV. And you don't have to sync anything or plug anything in or find the USB cable or do anything. I think that's going to be hot, and I'm going to really like it. So personally, the camera features are going to be pretty cool. Another thing that I'm personally going to like a lot is they've integrated Twitter into the iOS just a little bit more. You'll be able to go into the settings app and input your Twitter user ID and login information just once, and then you'll be able to access Twitter from a couple of Apple's other apps, like the camera app, so you can kind of tweet about stuff that you're doing a little bit more fluidly than you can right now. And you can do many things with Twitter with third-party apps. And some of those apps, unfortunately, probably won't be as relevant as they used to be, but it will integrate the user experience a little bit better. Although you'll still need a Twitter app. If you want to just send textual tweets and check your tweets, they haven't replaced Twitter. They've just integrated it better. So those are like my personal faves. But I think the thing that we'll all remember 5 years from now, like, well, what was new with iOS 5? Who can remember that? Because we're on, iOS 11 or something. Is we'll remember that this is when our Apple handheld devices became untethered from the computer. We won't have to plug them into iTunes anymore to set them up or to update the operating system. And using Wi-Fi and the iCloud, we won't have to sync our media from iTunes on a computer anymore to these devices. And for most users, this is just the most awesome feature ever, especially for people who find it intimidating or annoying or confusing to get that iTunes sync working. It's going to be a great feature. And it's a great feature for Apple because they can now sell Apple devices into situations where there isn't really a good computer to sync to, or to people who are just kind of anti-iTunes and just don't want iTunes anywhere near their stuff. So it's going to be a good thing. I sincerely hope that it really will work just as good as the way I've described it. I described it the way Apple described it at their marketing event. So hopefully it will be just as awesome in the real world.
Tonya, that may be the best summary of it that I've heard yet, is that's going to be the thing in 5 years that we're all going to remember. There are a lot of cool features that I personally was going through and it's like, yeah, I love this. But that's a good way to say it. In 5 years, this is the breaking point. This is when I think they can finally justify the claim that we are headed into a post-PC age, because now you're going to be able to take one of these devices, set it up, configure it, use it completely without it ever having to connect to your computer if you don't want it to. So,
right.
Good summary.
And I get to knock a whole chapter out of my book about the iPad, so that's awesome.
One last thing, Tonya. Nice shirt.
Oh, yeah. I put it on special for the show. It's my Vintage Next t-shirt.
Yeah, you don't see too many of those around. Very nice. Very nice.
I was working as a student at Cornell University when Cornell got one of the beta Next Labs, and this T-shirt came my way at that time.
And you've been waiting all this time just so you could wear it on MacNotables. That's great.
Yeah. Back in 1987, I thought, I'll keep this T-shirt because someday I'll be on a podcast.
Yeah.
But I thought it was kind of fun since I knew
we'd like to sell you too.
I knew we'd be talking about iOS 5 and Apple's announcements. I just thought that this sort of is a reminder of how long Steve Jobs and some of the other people who worked at Next with Steve, how long they've been in the industry, and how much passion they bring to trying new things with computing, and their willingness to keep trying things. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, sometimes they're too far ahead of their time. Sometimes they make strange decisions, but they keep trying to make computers that are fun for us to use.
And I'm excited to see just how much they've succeeded this time around, because it seems like this feels like another home run. Well, we have to do this again. I really appreciate the time as always, and hopefully we can do a little more where we don't just talk, but we can see each other and let everyone see you and realize just how credible you are. I'm going to have you on the screen most of the time.
Yeah, the video is very fun. I hope people enjoy it, but to me it adds another dimension. I've been watching some of the recent MacVoices TVs that would have otherwise just been MacNotable podcast episodes, and I just like seeing what people look like. It gives me a better sense of I don't know where they're coming from, or it just adds visual interest.
Yeah, it's definitely it's fun. It's a little more work to produce, but I think the results are worth it. Well, folks, that's Tonya Engst. She is the queen of TidBITS and Take Control. I will have links in the show notes in case you don't know the URLs. Please check them out. Follow Tonya on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter because, of course, now Apple has integrated Twitter, so you really need to be paying attention, folks. Tonya, we'll do it again soon. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Folks, MacNotables is the home of the Mac experts you want to hear from, and MacVoices TV is the talk of the Mac community. Until the next time, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching. MacVoices TV is part of the MacVoices group and a member of Mac Level 10.